I consent to being live streamed.
All right, well, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us here on a wonderful Wednesday afternoon. We're talking about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame class of 2023. I've got 5 phenomenal guests who all have opinions on this matter. I'm going to introduce them in just a moment. Well, let's get right to them and introduce them right now. Instead of me talking about how great these people are and how smart they are musically, I'm going to just throw it to them. Earl Burton, tell us about who you are and why you are qualified to have an opinion on the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Well, I've got currently I'm known as Tampa Earl on Real Rock Radio, which comes out of Manchester, England, the Tampa Earls, because I'm in Tampa, Florida. I also write for rocketnight.com, the magazine and website, and I have 40 years background in the radio and media business. So I have a little bit of knowledge of what I come from.
So if Lester Bangs had a child, that's Earl Burton. There we go.
It would be me, yes.
Matt Lessinger.
How are you? I just want to say I've never met you, Earl, but that is a radio voice if I've ever heard one. That is excellent. What's my expertise? Nothing compared to the other panelists, but Grammy Awards, Samara Joy, 22-1, Best New Artist. That's all. I'm going to rest my laurels on that for the next year at least. So other than that, I have no credentials.
He's also been on National Public Radio as probably the premier Grammys handicapper in the world. No joke. And he hit a 22-1 shot in the 2023 Grammys. Well done, Matt Lessinger. Becca.
Hey, I live here in Las Vegas, grew up in Michigan. So, you know, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, just right down the road there in Ohio. One of the redeeming qualities besides Cedar Point, you know, Ohio. I play 11 instruments. I've basically been playing music since I came out, and I'm in a band, local band here in Las Vegas, The Real Good Hurt. We have a show next week, Saturday, the 25th at 9 o'clock at Millennium Fandom Bar. So come out and see us. We play blues. I'm classically trained. I love rock and roll. I grew up listening to all of it, and I'm passionate about music. That's why I'm here.
Awesome. What a great intro. And we're going to get that at the end. We got to find out where that blues club is, where you're going to be performing. That sounds great. Jeremy Sand.
Good to be here, Nolan. I'm coming to you from sunny Cleveland, or doubling for northern New Jersey. So as far as credentials, I mean, I'm just a lifelong passionate music listener, concert goer. I did very briefly run my own indie record label / music publishing company, mostly centered around a project that my sister was working on back in 2010. We put out an EP for her. So if that qualifies me for anything, I don't know, but I have opinions. So here I am.
Great guest. Excellent. Let's get right to it, shall we? Let me tell you how it's going to work. Those of you tuning in to Facebook Live, you can type questions in. We're going to try to get to those questions, as many as possible, at the end of the show. We have a lot of nominees to discuss. We're going to basically ask our panel yes or no and why. And we're going to go through this in rapid succession. But first, let's ask a couple of questions about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, its foundations, why it's important. Well, I think that is that you or Earl that's taking, Matt, is that you or Earl taking that question?
I'll take that.
Please.
Yeah, if I'm correct, I think this is the 40-year anniversary of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So it was established in 1983. It's in Cleveland, which means I'll probably never visit it. It's, as Jeremy points out, it still looks like the Luxor to me, but okay, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I believe as of 2022, if I saw correctly, there are 365 inductees. And the thing I noted, which might be part of our discussion as we go along, is Rock and Roll Hall of Fame seems to be more and more of a misnomer as time goes on. It might need to be changed to the Modern Music Hall of Fame or, something of that ilk. But it started with rock and roll, and now we're definitely branching out. So, and I think that's going to factor into our discussion today.
We already have a dissenting opinion about that. We're going to get to that in a little bit. But first, let's talk about how somebody is nominated into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and then how are they ultimately selected. That's yours, Earl Burton.
Well, it's really basic. You have to become eligible. It has to have been at least 25 years since your first recording. Anytime after that, you're eligible. Now, what happens is there's approximately 30 members of the nominating committee that come together a couple times a year, talk over things. But when it comes down to the nominations, each comes with 2 nominees. Those 30 people, 60 nominees, they then vote on them and come up with a nominee list. That's what we're talking about here tonight. What will then happen is that list will go out to the living members of the hall and a larger group of musicians, industry insiders, managers, producers, journalists, people like that, approximately 1,100 people. And then that's where they will elect the performers for getting into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, usually between 5 and 7 artists or groups. There's also 3 non-voting categories: the Ahmet Ertegun Award for non-music, for industry people, not for musicians. There's also the Award for Musical Excellence and the Early Influencers Award. So there's 4 different ways you can get into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Now, I believe all the nominees here that we're going to talk about are all performers. Is that correct?
That is correct. The Ahmet Ertegun Award is normally chosen, and it's normally somebody who had an impact on rock and roll from outside of music, such as a label owner or a producer or something along that line.
Okay. I think what we'll do is when we get about halfway through the list, we will pick up a short debate and talk about broadening the categories or the genre of, it's not just rock and roll. We're going to get to that later. Let's hold off that little debate. Maybe we'll make that our halftime show, like the Super Bowl, huh? So let's get right to it. We're going to discuss this, yes or no. Jeremy, you're going to be first out of the box on this.
Oh, wow.
So get ready to step up to the plate. Yes or no, do they belong? Why or why not? Kate Bush.
So Kate Bush, I'm not going to profess to know a ton about her, but I think her impact and influence was more UK centric, if anything, as evidenced by having 3 Grammy nominations compared to 13 Brit Award nominations to her credit, 7 UK top 10 singles. She did put out 10 studio albums, which is a good body of work, and had a big duet with Peter Gabriel back in the day. Had a resurgence of one of her songs after placement in the show Stranger Things, but I just don't think that her worldwide influence rises to the level of Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductee. So I'm going to be a no on Kate Bush.
All right, Becca.
Yeah, it's like we were reading out of the same playbook. I'm very similar with that. I think she, is a great singer. She has talent, but I don't really feel like her body of work and her influence rises to what would be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So she's a no for me.
Matt?
Out of all the nominees, she's like my most emphatic no. I don't even think she'd be nominated if it wasn't for the resurgence of Running Up That Hill, which is like enjoyable for the nostalgia value, but it's like when it first came out, people got sick of it. So it's like only a matter of time before people get sick of it a second time. I don't know if anybody's listened to the number one hit that she had in England, which was called Wuthering Heights. I'm sorry, it is just the most grating, unlistenable number 1 song I've ever heard. It just proves that Brits don't have good musical taste sometimes. So that's it.
Oh boy, Matt's making friends already.
You can direct all your hate mail to Matt Lessinger at Gmail. Anyway, all right, you clean it up. Clean up the mess here, Earl Burton.
I will. You're all wrong. Kate Bush, if the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame was located in London, she'd have been a first-year eligible inductee. She is an excellent vocalist. She's worked with David Gilmour, Peter Gabriel. She has done things as far as breaking through for women in music that, I mean, that was one of the main reasons cited for Dolly Parton getting in last year. Well, if you're going to do that, then you got to apply the same standard across the board. I think that Bush's eclectic musical stylings definitely should warrant her entry into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It's something that has been long overlooked. This is like her 4th or 5th nomination, if I'm correct. And I think that she deserves to be in there just as much as Carly Simon, just as much as Linda Ronstadt, 2 people who were just singers, just like some of our other panelists here are saying. So I think Kate Bush deserves her seat there too.
I'll give anybody on the panel who wants to maybe change your opinion. Was the needle moved at all on that? Who wants to rebut what anything that Earl just said?
I mean, I think that, I don't disagree with what Earl's saying. I certainly don't have a breadth of knowledge of her larger body of work. But again, I just think when you're talking about worldwide impact and influence, and I'm taking my personal music preferences out of this entire discussion for all these artists. I don't think it rises to the level of those other women you mentioned, Dolly Parton, Linda Ronstadt. If you ask anybody if they're familiar with those names, you're going to get way more yes responses on those other folks than you would for Kate Bush, and maybe not in Britain, but certainly here. And right or wrong, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame institution has been way more US centric, than for artists of other countries. I mean, you've seen a bunch of British artists get in, but and I'm not like Matt, I don't think it has to do with their taste in music, but it's a US based institution, so a lot of the voters are probably American. So right or wrong, there is kind of that leaning to it.
Final score is no on Kate Bush, 3-1. Let's go to number 2. Earl, you're going to begin this one. Missy Elliott.
The thing about Missy Elliott is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, there are, I believe, if my memory is correct, 13 rap acts. 13, that's all. None of them are women. I would have rather have seen Queen Latifah get this nomination rather than Missy Elliott. But hey, that's the way it goes. Missy Elliott got it this time around. The problem is she's going in there alongside A Tribe Called Quest. Those are 2 rap acts, and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is bad about this. They will put nominees up, and then they will put in a couple more from the adjacent genre. For example, you get rap acts, well, let's have 2 or 3 in there. Got metal acts, well, let's have 2 or 3 in there. What it does is it dilutes the vote, and it keeps them from being elected into the hall. I think Missy Elliott is well deserved to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as the first female rapper to go, but I don't think she'll make it because I think that they'll dilute the vote between her and A Tribe Called Quest.
Matt?
I'm in agreement that she deserves to be the first female hip hop artist to be inducted. And I don't really have a strong opinion on whether it's now or later, because it'll happen eventually, I think. And it's just, if it doesn't happen this year, it'll happen later. But I mean, she's deserving. Yes.
Becca?
Oh, I'm a huge hell yes. I mean, I got in a huge debate about this at dinner the other night and with some friends. The reality is like, she is so influential for so many other artists. I mean, we would not have, I don't think, Destiny's Child, Beyonce, Lizzo. I mean, she is such a strong force that just really trailblazed and pushed through. I mean, you talk about Kate Bush's influence. Missy Elliott had so much influence, and not just as a rap artist, but she's a producer. She's a lyricist. She's continued her career way beyond, just cutting albums and being out there. She's a force. I think she gets in.
Jeremy, you get the final word.
Well, I'm going to emphasize a few things here. Again, this is not about my personal preference. Rap and hip hop, certainly not my wheelhouse. But like my feelings on the Baseball Hall of Fame, I really focus on the breadth of the body of work. So if a baseball player only played for 6 years or only had a peak of 6 years of his career, I'd be a no matter how prolific he was during that time period. Missy Elliott has 6 studio albums to her credit. She has a lot of bona fides, 40 million plus copies sold of her albums, bunch of top 10 singles, both solo and as a featured artist, 22 Grammy nominations, impressive, best-selling female rapper in Nielsen history. But for me, the scope of the work doesn't meet my personal benchmark with 6 albums. So I'm a no.
How
Wow,
many
so that
albums
looks
would you
like-
need? Oh, sorry to interrupt. How many
Go
albums
ahead,
would
Matt.
you need in your opinion?
I mean, there's not a hard number, that's not the only thing that I'm going to look at. If someone has 8 albums, I'll look at the other accomplishments and put that alongside everything else. But for me, that's cutting it a little slim, in my opinion.
She has 4 Grammys. I mean, that's not nothing. And out of all of her hits, she had 32 in the top Billboard 100. 32. I mean, that is a
Yeah,
huge.
I mentioned the 22 Grammy nominations. Like I said, she has accomplishments. I'm not detracting from that. I just don't. And again, I'm going to plead ignorance on this genre too. So anyone who wants to say, Jeremy, you don't know what the hell you're talking about when it comes to rap, I'm fully accepting of that opinion. So
You consider though, contextually looking at in the 90s, more men and more male rap groups and things were getting the bulk of the money versus women. She really had to push to get those albums made. It's not like it was an even playing field. It's not really even an even playing field now. We look at the difference between how many female artists are in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame versus male. I don't think she was getting the attention, and so she really pushed with less than everybody else, which is why I think it's even more impressive.
probably a valid argument. I'm still a no.
Well, it looks like we're divided on this one. This is a good one. Well, I don't think I expected what an interesting discussion this one is. I hate to move on. I knew this would be good stuff. Let's move on. Sorry. George Michael, I want your sex. All right. What do you say? We're going to start off with Matt Lessinger. George Michael, yes or no?
George Michael, absolutely yes. I think with, first he had Wham, then he had his solo career. I mean, he was a bona fide A-list musician for a 10-year span. He has 3 legit standards. Like whether you like them or not, there's 3 songs that are absolutely a part of musical culture. Last Christmas, you can't avoid that, whether you like it or not. And Careless Whisper, you can't avoid whether you like it or not. And maybe to a slightly lesser extent, Wake Me Up Before You Go. And then that's not even counting his solo career with I Want Your Sex and Faith and all of those. I just feel like their lasting influence is undeniable. One of the, or 2 of the general discussion topics that I thought might come up maybe at halftime, like you said, number 1 is, should the Hall of Fame be expanded beyond rock and roll? And number 2 is like, how much influence does what an artist does outside of their musical, their hits or whatever, their work in the community and their work, like how much of an effect does that have on whether they're accepted? And George Michael is the first one, at least that I'm aware of, out of the ones we mentioned, that did so much work for the LGBT community and, has been outspoken about that. And I mean, whether or not he'll get in is, also the fact that he somewhat recently passed on. I think he gets in. Yes.
Becca, agree?
Oh yeah. I mean, not just on some of the things that you were sharing, Matt, but also, I mean, I was coming up into my sexuality when I Want Your Sex first was coming onto the radio. And I'm like, they can say that on the radio. I mean, the only other song I remember growing up listening to had the word sex in it was Sexual Healing, but that was an R&B and it wasn't really, mass played. This was like, whoa, the Clutching the Pearls was happening in my neighborhood. The video was so provocative. And he just had, it felt like the late 80s into the mid 90s. It was just hit after hit after hit, all from his, I love Andrew Ridgeley from Wham, but really it's George Michael. That was the pretty boy face of it. And he was just a machine. He was awesome. I'm a solid yes.
That's 2-0 so far. Mr. Sand?
Well, you guys will probably start to notice a pattern here.
Oh, no.
As
No.
with baseball, I'm a small hall guy with baseball. I'm a small hall guy basically with any Hall of Fame. Also want to point out the way the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame does things. They consider a person's work with a group separate from their solo work. So I'm not taking into consideration the Wham stuff. Can't argue with the impact of Faith and Listen Without Prejudice. They were two of the most ubiquitous albums of the time. But 5 total albums, only 2, maybe 3 were actually during the peak of his commercial popularity. So again, that's a big thing for me, like the scope of the body of work, as I've mentioned already. And my original thought was, when I heard George Michael was up for this, was yes. But looking closer at the body of work, I changed my mind, and I'm a no.
Wow, what a gutsy no. Okay, Earl.
I'm going to side with Jeremy on this one. I think no, because quite honestly, like he said, take out Wham. He's not being voted in with Andrew Ridgeley. Take out Wham. Then you have maybe 2, 3 albums max where he was really at the peak of his powers. I also see here that, Cyndi Lauper is also nominated. Once again, we have a way of splitting our vote. You might have someone say, wow, I really want an 80s artist in there, but which one? And you'll get half that'll vote Cyndi Lauper, half that'll vote for George Michael, because they can't coalesce behind one if they're both eligible. So I'm going to have to reluctantly say no. Does he deserve it? It's a good argument, but I can't vote for him myself.
Well, so it's split. Well, I'm the tiebreaker. I say yes. I saw George Michael in concert. My wife and I, we loved the show. But I know
I love George Michael. Like I said, I'm taking personal preference out of it. I saw him on the Faith tour.
Mm-hmm.
I love
That's
his music. But
I don't know. He has 8 #1 hits. None of the other artists even close to that.
All right, good way to end that one. Boy, that's interesting. I don't think I expected that to run 2-2. And let's just move on, because these are fascinating. Sheryl Crow, Becca, let's start with you on Sheryl Crow.
Yeah, so Sheryl Crow, another fellow bass player, another musician. She is a phenomenal body of work. I'm a big yes for her. I loved a lot of things that she did. She's got 9 Grammys. She is 19 songs total on the top 100. She doesn't have a #1 hit, but she's got 4 in the top 10. And she was like just really big when I was in college, and I really enjoyed a lot of her music. She shaped a lot of the things that I'm interested in. So my personal bias comes in there, and I openly admit that. But I think from a musician standpoint, her writing is great. It has nuance. It's not just 3 chords. So yeah, she's a yes for me.
Lessinger?
Okay. Following that, because I'm going to defer to Becca as like the far more knowledgeable musician. Just my take on Sheryl Crow when I would listen to her is I always thought of her as like the female version of Tom Petty, which to me was like actually simple and catchy chords. And I probably just didn't get the nuance of it, which I freely admit. But I always thought simple and catchy chords and simple and catchy songs. So if she's the female version of Tom Petty, Tom Petty got inducted 20 years ago. And granted, maybe he had a longer career with more hits, but her longevity is approaching his now. So if he's in, she probably deserves it too. And, you know, again, whether it's this time or not, you know, she'll probably get in eventually. So, I mean, I'm a modest yes, I guess.
Earl?
I'd love to see Sheryl Crow get in. She's a personal favorite of mine. I've loved her music ever since she came out with Tuesday Night Music Club. The thing is, though, first-year nominees have a very difficult time getting in, and she's a first-time nominee. I would love to see it happen. I don't think she will, just simply because of the quality of the field. But I do think she will come back in 2024, and then she'll get in. She'll kind of be a little bit like Pat Benatar in that way, in that, you know, they give it a taste, and then they come in the next time and induct her. This time around, 2023, no.
Jeremy?
So out of all the people on this list, this is the one that was probably the hardest call for me. I'm a Sheryl Crow fan. I saw her live. She was great. There are a lot of accomplishments. She has the 10 studio albums, which is a good breadth of work, 50 million plus copies sold, 32 Grammy nominations with 9 wins. Very impressive. 2 Golden Globe nominations. Crossed over into country, got a few nominations for the country awards as well. Peak of her career was basically 13 years, also impressive. All of this is arguing against my own decision, which is why it was such a iffy call for me. And I could certainly probably be persuaded in future years, but I just haven't seen a lot of documented evidence of her influence and impact on other artists. And that's a hard thing to quantify, admittedly. But I don't know that she falls into that category, which I think is another important consideration for the Hall. So Matt's a modest yes, I'm a modest no, with room for argument in future years.
Looks like it's a 3-1 final on Crow. I'll also add that I think that I think Earl made a really good point that maybe next year, I don't have any sense of the timing, but I will say that having worked her way up from a background singer and, you know, kind of that wrecking crew kind of, you know, paid her dues. I think that that's respected in the music industry, especially amongst people that work in the studio. I think that's going to carry a little extra weight with somebody like her instead of, like, you know, corporate promoted flash in the pan boy band types that, in my view, don't pay their dues all the time. So I think Crow gets in this year, if not next. I think you're right. So let's move on and to Matt. You're going to take this one first. A Tribe Called Quest.
Right. I'm actually a no on them. They were creative. I like them. And they formed a more, you know, jazzy type of hip hop. And it just, to me, it wasn't Hall of Fame worthy, because I feel like if you're the pioneer of a genre, which they could probably be considered the pioneer of the genre, and you still have to be one of the best of that genre. I just feel like other artists took their influence and just ran with it and made much more listenable tracks. I mean, Erykah Badu, Lauryn Hill with the Fugees, and Outkast. Like, I feel like they're the ones that are going to be deserving one day. And A Tribe Called Quest was the originators, but there wasn't enough there, in my opinion. I mean, even, you know, Questlove, the drummer, got his name because he loves A Tribe Called Quest. I think he's more worthy than the band he idolized. So I'm a no on them.
Who wants to go next? Go ahead.
I'll go next. So yeah, again, not the world's foremost authority on rap and hip hop, but again, they only had 6 studio albums. They have 4 Grammy nominations. Unbeknownst to me, until I started looking at this for this panel, I guess they also kind of launched the career of Busta Rhymes on their hit Scenario, which you could argue he might be more deserving of this than they are because he was more prolific from the output of his career. So I just don't see that rising to the benchmark for the Rock Hall induction. So they're going to be a no.
Becca?
Yeah, I don't have to say much more than what my fellow panelists said. I'm a no for similar reasons, and I think they're great. I like some of their sound. I think they spun off some really great stuff, but the breadth of work for me just isn't there.
Well, it's not uncommon that the originators are the ones that are overlooked, especially when it comes down to rap. Tribe Called Quest, I was originally a no. Then I actually started listening to them and listening how they incorporated jazz and some alternative rock sounds and their lyrical content, which, you know, was talking about the plight of their community that in many ways still exists today. I think that they were original, they were groundbreaking, and that's what the qualifications for getting in the Rock Hall are. You've had to have had a change on the course. And I think Tribe Called Quest did. So I'm going to go yes with them.
All right. Nice effort there in a losing cause, Earl Burton. Good argument, though. 3-1 on the no so far, unless anybody wants to amend their vote.
I'm willing to give them more of a listen.
Good. I think we all are. And who knows, you know, down the road what happens. So we'll move on to Iron Maiden. All right, here we go. Jeremy, take it out of the box. Iron Maiden.
Sure. So anybody who knows me well knows that I was big into the 80s hard rock scene.
That's why we went to you first, brother.
Ironically enough, Iron Maiden was not really one of the artists that was on my radar at that time. I didn't really become aware of a lot of their material until later years. So this is not really even coming from a personal preference standpoint once again, but 17 studio albums, 5 Grammy nominations with very little US radio support or mainstream media support. They managed to sell more than 130 million copies of their albums. They were truly a worldwide act, especially throughout Europe, Japan, and also the US. Pioneered the new wave of British heavy metal movement, hard to say. And it's pretty well documented that they've influenced legions of hard rock, metal, and alternative rock acts. So they're the first yes for me on the list. Minor yes, but a
minor
yes.
Becca?
Oh yeah, I was shocked that they weren't in already. I was like, I thought I saw them when I was there, but I guess I didn't. But yeah, I'm a huge metal fan from the 80s, so I was just kind of like, yeah, they're a yes for me with all the things that my friend there shared. So
all right, Earl?
You know, the thing is, hard rock, heavy metal, whatever you want to call it, has been one of the bastard stepchildren of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Iron Maiden should have been in there a decade ago, along with Judas Priest, Motorhead, Thin Lizzy. I could keep going. I'm a definite yes on Iron Maiden being inducted. However, I think they're probably going to do the same thing with them that they did with Judas Priest last year and shoot them in through the artistic excellence method rather than actually voting them in as a performer.
Yeah, Judas Priest got in last year that way. And then I don't think Thin Lizzy's even in yet. So
no.
There's another topic for discussion. All right, Matt, is it going to be unanimous?
No, it's not. I get to be the dissenter this time. No. All right, look, check it out. Right, Jeremy, you're talking about like I don't think it's a apples to apples when you talk about the Baseball Hall of Fame. But one of the things about the Baseball Hall of Fame is that you really had to be like the best at your position for at least some period of time, right? I mean, if you're going to make it to the Hall of Fame as a second baseman, you really had to be the best second baseman for at least a 2 or 3 year period. Iron Maiden, in my personal opinion, was never the best. Like, they were good. They had a long career. Maybe if I was in Europe or England, I would feel differently. In the United States, they were overshadowed by Metallica. They were overshadowed by Ozzy Osbourne. They were overshadowed by everybody of their era. Like, Iron Maiden was never a premier metal band, in my opinion. And I know people disagree with that, but
130
That's my
million people disagree.
fine. Okay. No, 130 million people bought their stuff. Doesn't mean they were ever like, it could have been like a consistent like 280 lifetime hitter, but was never the MVP. You know what I mean? That's the way I look at them. So it's a no for me. Sorry to all their fans out there.
Line of the day, Jeremy Sands. And by the way, I guess you don't want the Doors in there too, because they didn't dominate, rock and roll for their 4 or 5 years. So, Matt, I just can't believe you. Seriously, wow.
Wow.
Still haven't
that's a
agreed.
call.
There's still no unanimous decisions here.
I was a fan of 80s hard rock heavy metal, as you know, Jeremy. How many Iron Maiden songs could we name in the 80s when we were listening to it?
Right. Well, I started out by saying that they were not on my radar screen back then.
But that means something, right? I mean, I agree. Part of that is because of radio.
It means that
it
means they didn't get any support from mainstream radio here.
True.
I can name
Absolutely.
3 songs off the top of my head: "Run to the Hills," "Killers," and
Six.
Number of the Beast.
So the number of the, right. I mean, I can name those now, like, and I'm aware of them. It's just, I feel like if they were that good, the radio would have found them, but I could be wrong. Okay, I'm done. All right.
All right. I hate to leave this one. This is getting good. And we're about halfway through. Let's do another 1 or 2, and then we'll do our little halftime show. Joy Davidson, New Order. Earl Burton, what do you think?
The thing is, Joy Division and New Order were one of the forefathers of the goth alternative sound. They kind of brought that darker edged new wave tunage to the world. You've got The Cure in there. You've got Depeche Mode. You've got 9 Inch Nails. Then once again, why don't we have the originators? Kraftwerk got in, through the back door here a couple of years ago. Joy Division, New Order deserve to be there. They're a yes, in my opinion, as far as being inducted.
Matt?
I'm basically going to make the same argument I made with A Tribe Called Quest, and Earl made a similar argument in the reverse. I can appreciate the influence they had on later artists. I just feel like the later artists were so much better. The ones that you named as an example. I mean, not just Depeche Mode, but I mean, to take it a step further to electronic dance music with Enigma and Daft Punk, who were clearly influenced by them, but they're so much better. I mean, Joy Division and New Order, I get credit for being the originators, but it's really raw and rough and like just too unrefined for me, even for its time. So it's a no for me.
Becca?
Yeah, I feel the same way. I mean, I love the influence. It's definitely a style of music that I listen to. I mean, I listen to everything, let's be real, but it's I think they may get in at some point. I don't think they would get in this year. And for me, with the field that they're in, it's a no, sadly.
All right. So it's interesting because we've yet to have a unanimous yes. We've also yet to have a unanimous no. Jeremy, are we going to break the spell?
Well, I think we're already at odds because didn't Earl vote yes?
Oh, he said yes. Excuse me.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
so I'm going to agree with Bex and Matt on this one.
Sorry.
I don't see any argument for New Order. I mean, it's essentially New Order. Joy Division had 2 albums and their lead singer died by suicide, and New Order sprung from the ashes. So, I mean, I like some of their music, but I just don't see their worldwide impact and influence. I don't see, the breadth of work. They had 14 top 10 US dance singles. That's about, I think, all you can really say as far as their accomplishments go. And maybe influence some of the artists like the ones you mentioned, but I think Depeche Mode probably influenced more people than New Order did. So I'm a no.
Excellent. So we are still divided on every single nominee. Good time to have our halftime show. By that, it'll be short, but it'll be a nice discussion about something that's really a problem for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, because it's not just about rock and roll anymore. Our next nominee, by the way, is Willie Nelson. Now we're going to talk about Willie Nelson separately in his own in a moment. So let's don't talk about Willie Nelson or other artists. Let's just address the problem the rock and roll has with branding, with naming. What are we going to do with in the future with country artists? Burt Bacharach just died. I mean, how is he not in anything associated with Music Hall of Fames? He should be in everything, of course. I mean, and then we get into Barbara Streisand's and all that. Where do we draw lines on pop music versus rock music? I've basically just thrown a bunch of stuff against the wall. And I'm going to start with Earl Burton because this is your topic and the platform is yours.
Here's the thing. Rock and roll is based in country, blues, jazz, folk. I mean, there's a myriad of musical stylings that make up rock and roll. What you're talking about there, Nolan, is rock music. The guitar, bass, drums, screeching vocalist. That's rock music, which is also a subset of rock and roll. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is doing what it's supposed to do. It honors the best that has come out from every form that makes up rock and roll. That means, yes, the country artists, of which I think I remember saying that there were 13. No, that's rappers. There's, I think, either 11 or 12 country artists that have been inducted. They're not overrunning the hall. We're still inducting, for the most part, rock artists, but we're also inducting the best of what's come from the side, from country, from blues, from jazz, from folk. That's all that's happening. It's still the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, not the Rock Hall of Fame. It's the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It incorporates it all.
Door's open.
I mean, that, oh, sorry, go ahead, Becca.
Okay, no worries. I'm totally in agreement with Earl. I mean, if you think about when you look at the roots of music in general and how it has evolved and changed over the years, this is just honoring the way music is now. I mean, it's kind of the split between, you know, there's classical and then there's everything that's sort of just come off of all of that. I mean, we just, as a world, we play with sound. I mean, we have our particular scales, and blues has its own scales, and, you know, Eastern music has their own scales, and Middle Eastern has its own sound. But we all kind of come back to, how do we play with it? How do we shape it? How do we make it new? How do we make it change? How do we make it grow? And even listening to classical music, I mean, we have a running joke in our house about how, like, you know, Vivaldi was like the rock music of the Baroque period. I mean, you had people who were, you know, listening to Bach, but then you had people that are like jamming out to Four Seasons. And all of, you know, 19th century, you know, 20th century modern music, Shostakovich, I mean, music of Stravinsky is like the music of the revolution. I mean, that is rock music of its time. I think the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It's just honoring the way music has evolved, and we're picking the best of the best.
And there was that time that Vivaldi got arrested in the public restroom, right? No, that was someone else.
Well, we don't know. I mean, those records.
Yeah, we don't have police blotters from that day.
I don't fully agree with the notion that, you know, the distinction between rock and rock and roll. I think there are a couple problems with how the institution has gone about establishing things. First of all, like with the Baseball Hall of Fame, there are very few hard and fast guidelines about what constitutes someone warranting consideration even for nomination. So it's very objective. Another thing about the Rock Hall specifically is that everything is kind of shrouded in secrecy. Despite Earl's opening remarks about the process, there's not a lot that's made publicly available about how that process actually works, and it's long been thought to be very political and a lot of personal agendas. Like I just read today that Jan Wenner, the founder of Rolling Stone, had a personal dislike for Warren Zevon, one of the guys on the list this year, and actively campaigned to keep him out. So there's that, those types of forces at work. And also the term that Matt used at the very top of the discussion is exactly how I was going to describe it. It's a misnomer to call it the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I think the original intent, or the intent as it's evolved over the years, is to be inclusive of all the different types of music that influence rock and roll and that had a part in making rock and roll what it is. But it confuses the masses when you call it the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and then try to induct rappers and even pop artists like Madonna and country music. I mean, Dolly Parton herself nearly rejected not her own induction last year until she had some time to kind of reconsider. But she came out and said, "I'm not rock." So there, you can see there's a lot of confusion because the actual inductee herself was confused about it. And now she's turned around and said, "I'm going to go make a rock record and capitalize on the whole situation." But I think that it's fine. I personally look past all the genre classifications. It doesn't bother me that country music stars or pop stars are getting in there. I think rap is a little dicier of a situation because I think it's a little more akin to poetry than it is to actual music, but that again is my personal feeling.
Groups? What were the
What's that?
doo-wop groups? They took their street poetry and brought it to the stage.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's all kinds of arguments to be made there. And that's why I don't summarily dismiss any of those subgenres from induction, because I work with the understanding of what they're trying to do, even though they may have misnamed the actual institution.
I mean, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, the thing is, one of the final things I was going to say is I've always liked to say the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame salutes the predominant form of entertainment since the 1950s. Boom. That's all you need to know. And that means you could bring in pretty much, country, blues, rap. It covers everything with that knowledge.
I mean, Nolan's introduction to this was that, it has a marketing or a branding problem. So it's not that I disagree with anything that you said, Earl or Becca. I mean, all music influences all other music, but, this is a marketing issue more than anything, because most people are not going to have that interpretation of what belongs in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And definitely people older than myself are looking at rap artists getting inducted, and it's like, get off my lawn. This is the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So it's okay if it is. The phrase you just used, Earl, was a good one. The most popular music of a given era or whatever. But then they have to make that a little clearer, perhaps, that's their goal. And then I'll just add that my father is the moderator of the doo-wop corner. And if I think his view of modern day rap is that, doo-wop took an awful left turn somewhere and we ended up with what we have now, but that's coming from a 70-something-year-old. But, definitely all music of all genres, borrows from all other genres. There's no argument to that. But just going back to what Nolan said, do we then, make a more public, or does the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame make a more public statement about, what its intent is, who it's honoring, to avoid confusion more than anything.
Excellent discussion, ladies and gentlemen. Let's move on. Second half of our nominees 2023 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Becca, you're going to come out swinging on this one. Just what we were talking about a second ago. No question he's an American icon, but is he worthy of induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Willie Nelson.
Yeah. So, I mean, yes. I'm yes. And I don't even know where to start. And you said to keep it brief. So, like you said,
Well, why the hesitancy? Go ahead, because the reasons are obvious, but why the hesitancy?
well, I mean, just thinking back to our last discussion, figuring out how I want to frame it. he's, you know, Johnny Cash is in, and I'm certainly not going to try to say that Willie Nelson's anything like Johnny Cash. They're very different. They're country, but they have different sounds. Willie Nelson is really cool. You know, he just
End of story.
he exudes cool. And I mean, he just recently had his birthday, and the artist that he got to come out and perform for it, like the influence that he's had just over music in general, his years of, you know, his career years, it's awesome. I was, again, one of those that I was surprised wasn't already in. So that's all I need to say.
That's a yes. Jeremy, go ahead.
Yeah, again, removing my own personal taste from the discussion in a big way, because I absolutely detest country music. This was the easiest yes of the entire list for me. Talk about scope of work: 72 studio albums, 27 top 10 country singles, 2 big crossover top 10 singles, duets with other artists, Oscar nomination for On the Road Again, 56 Grammy nominations with 12 wins, more than 60 million copies sold, was one of the originators of Farm Aid. His name is basically synonymous with country music. He's a country icon. He's been in movies and TV. Everybody knows who Willie Nelson is, and I'm sure he's influenced a ton of country artists after him. Not even a question. Big yes.
That's 2-0 for yes. Earl?
Hey, make it 3-0. Willie Nelson, that's all you got to say. Willie. I mean, the man dates back to the 50s as far as his songwriting. He wrote Crazy, for crying out loud. He wrote Patsy Cline's Crazy. I mean, if that song isn't iconic enough for you, then you add in everything he's done as far as his own work. You know, he's dabbled in Spanish. I mean, anybody who has ever listened to him and Ray Charles do 7 Spanish Angels and not had a feeling in their heart, they might as well be dead. I mean, the man has done it all. And you want to really show where he's rock and roll? Talk about how he started up the outlaw country movement of the late 60s and early 70s, you know, with Waylon Jennings and a couple of other folks in there. You know, they actually came out and said, we're not going by the standards. We're not going by what Nashville tells us to do. We're going to go off and do our own thing. If that's not rock and roll, I don't know what to tell you.
Outstanding. Matt, is it going to be unanimous?
Can you imagine the hate I would get if I said no right now? I mean, of course it's a yes. I mean, I think I had the same reaction as Becca. I was like, how is he not already in? Like when I saw the nominees.
I was shocked. Yeah.
Right. I mean, he was inducted to the Country Music Hall of Fame 30 years ago. So this is long overdue. It's a yes.
And he plays with a lot of rock artists, and, you know, Bob Dylan, the Stones, Ray Charles, Van Morrison. He's been with everybody and influenced everybody. This is an easy yes. 5-0. Here we go. Cyndi Lauper. And if you are under the age of whatever, you probably know Cyndi Lauper from doing some pharmaceutical commercial. But she was a smash. Probably one of the biggest names of the 80s, certainly. Fun act to watch. But is she worthy of a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction? Matt Lessinger, you go first, please.
Yeah, I can already sense where me and Jeremy are going to differ on this, because if we're going down to her longevity or body of work, whatever, he's probably going to say no, because she only had, you know, 2, maybe 3 albums that were at the peak of her popularity. But it's a yes. I mean, she was a cultural icon, like not to the same level as Willie Nelson, I'm not saying, but, you know, everybody knew who she was, even if you weren't into music. If you were only into wrestling, you knew who she was. You know, arguably more than any other female, she ushered in the music video era. You know, I would say it was Michael Jackson for the men and Cyndi Lauper for the women.
I mean, it was Madonna for the women. I mean, let's be honest.
I think it was Cyndi Lauper before Madonna, is what I'll say. Because, like, if we go to Like a Virgin, which was 1984, but I mean, Girls Just Want to Have Fun was 83.
Yeah,
so you know,
Star were 81 and 82.
That's
Yeah,
fair. No, that's
Madonna,
no.
go
but-
back to Holiday, you know.
But were those music videos iconic is what I'm saying. Like a Virgin was the iconic music video that put Madonna on the map in that way. I mean, she was on the map musically, but Cyndi Lauper's music video for Girls Just Want to Have Fun was iconic, in my opinion, you know, and that to me, that preceded Madonna's iconic music videos. And part of it for me is that Cyndi Lauper, you know, continues to tour and perform to this day and still draws huge crowds, even if nobody can name a song of hers after 1988. Doesn't matter. She still puts on a great show from everything I've heard, and she's a yes.
Earl?
I have to agree with a lot of what Matt has to say there, but at the same time, I'm going to have to agree with what Jeremy's probably going to say. You know, she had a very short time frame of success, you know, as far as the actual charts go. Never mind the factor that she has been a prolific songwriter, vocalist, Broadway writer. I mean, those are things that, yes, are important, but I think Madonna kind of ruined it for her. When she came out and just kind of blew it out of the water in the 80s. And you know, to try to hold Cyndi Lauper up to a Madonna, it's kind of a little bit tough. I love Cyndi Lauper's music, but I'm going to have to go a no on this one.
Jeremy, I think we know where you stand, but tell us and then tell us
Everybody
why.
already spoke for me. How about- in this case, Goonies are not good enough. I just don't see the argument for Cyndi Lauper, although Matt made some good points. I don't think touring, you know, into current modern times and putting on a good show is worthy of a Rock Hall induction. She had 11 studio albums, but only about 2 of them came during her period of relevance. You know, definitely has accomplishments. 16 Grammy nominations, nominated for Kinky Boots on Broadway, 50 million copies sold, not taking anything away from her career. But yeah, I think Madonna was what maybe Cyndi Lauper was striving to be or had a chance to be, but was not. So it's a no for me.
It's 2-2, and I'm not going to break the tie. I can see both sides of it. Well said. The only thing I'll add about Cyndi Lauper
Wait, Becca didn't vote yet.
I'm sorry? Oh,
Um,
Becca, I'm sorry. Excuse me, Becca. Go ahead. I beg your pardon.
Yeah, no. So I thought the comparison between Cyndi Lauper and Madonna would come up, and I think it's awesome to just delve into that just a little bit. I don't think Cyndi Lauper wanted to be Madonna. Madonna was very much, you know, women empowerment by sexuality, and Cyndi Lauper was very much women empowerment by being who you are. Now, some people would say that Madonna also is like be who you are, but was very sexualized. I think, you know, when you look at Cyndi Lauper, you look at somebody who got kicked out of her home. She was, you know, came up from nothing and blazed her career. I don't think women, again, contextually at the time, were getting the same amount of attention, radio play, funds going towards them. She really pushed all of that envelope, and she didn't look like everybody else. Madonna had a very traditional look. She was very mainstream looking with the sexuality as well. You had Cyndi Lauper, who had weird hair. She had weird costumes. She had lots of different colors. She shaved her head at one point. You know, she had a ton of influence. And again, we talked earlier about George Michael's influence with the LGBTQ community. Cyndi Lauper, again, was also very much passionate about that as well. She's continued to work in that area, and she has Broadway stuff that she's continued to do. It's a solid yes for me.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to preempt your close there. You made a really good case, and you kind of pulled me in that direction, because rock is not just about music, it's about culture and moving needles. And I would say that the only thing the reason that she's not a real solid yes for some people is I think she was typecast to a certain extent. Music can be fun, but she tried to break away after her string of hits and do more serious music, and it wasn't as well received. I think that's a tragedy. Doesn't mean that she shouldn't try and her music wasn't equally as good, but she got typecast as this, you know, bouncing around the room, girls just want to have fun, all of that. And I think it's in a way her early success, if that's the right term, hurt her in the long run. But I'm not going to penalize her now.
There may be a difference between being a Hall of Fame talent and having a Hall of Fame career. She may very well be a Hall of Fame talent, but I don't think she had a Hall of Fame career.
I think her songwriting is overlooked.
I would agree with that.
Oh, good discussion. Let's move on, only because we have to out of time. Really fun stuff. Rage Against the Machine. Earl Burton.
Overwhelmingly, yes. And why has it taken so damn long for it to happen? I mean, yes, they only have 4 albums underneath their belt, but you're talking about some of the most politically charged music that has come out of the 90s. I mean, they were the vanguard of political rock during that time. Now add into that factor that they were one of the first originators of the rap rock genre, along with Faith No More, Red Hot Chili Peppers. They kind of incorporated the rap stylings into their music. I think Tom Morello's guitar work is amazing, and Zach De La Rocha gets overlooked sometimes because of the political largesse of what they're talking about. But I don't know why Rage hasn't already gotten in, unless that they're just kind of like saying, well, let's get some of these other hard rock metal acts in first, then we'll do you. And that's entirely possible what's going on.
Matt?
This is by far the most in agreement I think Earl and I have been on any of the nominees. I really don't have anything to add to that. He said basically everything I was going to say. I think other than Willie Nelson, who is the biggest yes, because I thought he already was in. Rage Against the Machine is the biggest yes for me. For all the reasons Earl just said. I think Tom Morello is the best guitarist of our generation. So yeah.
Well, Becca.
I'm going to get a lot of hate mail here.
I'll be right next to you, so don't worry.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I'm a no. And it's not anything against Tom Morello. I think he has a lot of talent as a guitarist, but their stuff all sounds the same to me. And they never really pushed themselves. Like you mentioned, Faith No More, Red Hot Chili Peppers, they were always doing things with their sound to innovate and change and push. And for me, I just don't hear that. Like, yes, they have a very distinctive sound. You hear the songs that they play and you're like, okay, yep, that's Rage Against the Machine. But they just, for me personally, it's a no. I understand they keep getting nominated and I think they will get in eventually against this class. It's a no.
So I actually agree with a lot of what Earl said. So I'm not taking away from, Rage Against the Machine's accomplishments. Like I said, sometimes it's a battle between Hall of Fame talent and Hall of Fame career. I'm not a personal fan, but again, I'm keeping that out of the equation. Tom Morello is a great guitarist. They did have politically charged lyrics, and I'm sure they were influential. They chose not to continue forward with that career past 4 albums. That doesn't do it for me. So I'm a no.
Sure, we have another split, it looks like. And I have to, I don't know if she's watching, but Lisa Tenner, if you're out there, I know you were the manager for this, business manager, I should say, for the group Soundgarden. And here's your group. So if you're listening, wave to you, Lisa Tenner, who a lot of us know through the gambling Las Vegas poker culture. So anyway, Soundgarden is up for Rock and Roll Hall of Fame this year. Jeremy, let's go back in reverse order. You get to go first this time.
Okay, well, I'm probably one of the few people on the planet who don't feel that Nirvana should be in the Hall of Fame. And I have this argument with baseball all the time. There's a lot of parallels between the two institutions, I think, because I just have these criteria that I can't get past. I mean, Nirvana had, a couple albums that they released, and unfortunately, we know what happened to Kurt Cobain. The same thing sadly happened to Chris Cornell, albeit a little later in his life, after Soundgarden was pretty much done. But 6 albums, and only a couple of those really during the peak of their commercial impact. I get it that they were part of the onset of grunge and influenced a lot of other bands, and Chris Cornell is maybe one of the best rock vocalists in history, but not Rock Hall for me.
Becca?
Yeah, I disagree with Jeremy. I think that, you know, the Seattle sound, the early grunge, Nirvana, Alice in Chains, Soundgarden, it was such a movement, and it really is kind of the root of alternative rock as we know it. I mean, it's grunge has spun that off into it's huge field. There's so much influence there. I agree with you on Chris Cornell, and he will be somebody that I hope, you know, gets a nod separately, just because of his influence and talent at some point. But I think it's honoring their legacy and everything that they've done. I mean, they were so huge even before they were recording. I mean, they were performing all the time.
Soundgarden, yes or no? Earl, Burton?
Oh, I'm an overwhelming yes on Soundgarden. They were, people tend to forget this. They were the first grunge band to earn a major label deal. They, before Nirvana, before Pearl Jam, they were the first. And they represented Seattle well. But the one thing that I would love to see, you know, the Rock Hall does have a tendency to say, well, we've already got Nirvana and Pearl Jam. I think that's enough of a representation. No, there's other bands that came out that were just as worthy as Pearl Jam or Nirvana. Soundgarden is one of them. I would say Mother Love Bone is another that deserves mention. And maybe, you know, if you want to count the super group, you know, Temple of the Dog might be a good idea, but they only had one record. But anyway, I'm getting off track here. Screaming Trees anymore. I'm stopping right there. But the thing is, the Rock Hall tends to say, well, we've got these guys already. That doesn't tell the entire story. And I think Soundgarden is an important part of adding to that story, as would be Alice in Chains. Okay, I'm stopping now. But yeah, Soundgarden is a yes.
Okay. Try to follow that, Matt.
No, I mean, I started out as a no, but what Becca and Earl said, I'm going to abstain. I mean, I think I realize I don't know enough about them to have an opinion. I'm being honest.
Wow.
You know, I always felt that they were never the main attraction. You know, similar to what I was saying before, like all the bands were named Nirvana, Pearl Jam, even Alice in Chains. I thought were all better bands than Soundgarden, but I also am not familiar with their roots or, you know, that they came first or whatever. So, okay, I'm fine either way. I'll abstain.
All right, you're abstaining. Is that 2-1-1? Is that a yes?
2-1-1.
Is that
Yeah.
a yes?
That would be a 2-1-1.
Got it. Okay. Just want to make sure I got this right.
Football.
All right. We got a tie or somebody abstaining. Cool. Just like the House of Representatives. Here we are. Three more to go. Here's another one. How are they not in already? But let's just talk about it. Matt, you're going to go first on the Spinners.
So wait, I almost want you to go first. If your opinion is how are they not in already, maybe you could chime in on this one and let us know how you feel.
No, I'll defer to the group first. Go ahead.
Okay. Darn it. All right, because I'm a no, but I don't know them that well. I mean, I know some of their hits from the 70s, but yeah, I credit them for the ridiculous longevity. Was it like 70 years or something? I mean, that's insane. And I think one of the members has been with them since day one, which is even more insane. But he's still spinning, but you made me think of they're spinning anyway. I didn't think they ever moved the needle musically, but I can abstain from this one too, because I was going to be a no, but you could talk me out of it easily. So
Becca?
Yeah, I was kind of like you, Nolan. How are they not in already? I mean, 70 years, original members, all of that stuff. That you got to give it up to some of these guys that have just been doing this for so long. And you don't last in this business if you don't have, you know, not like that, without talent. you have to have ability. You have to have ability to write, to play, arrange, to do all of that stuff. And I think it's been a miss. It's been a miss.
Jeremy?
Yeah, so Matt abstained on Soundgarden. I think I'm going to do a similar move here with the Spinners. It's just so far out of the realm of my scope of musical knowledge, not only because it's Motown, but just, before my time, obviously from the peak of their success. I just don't even know how to formulate an opinion on
That's
whether
okay.
it deserves to
There's
be
a lot
in or
of,
not. So
I
I am a
okay.
I'm a
It's
pass.
okay to abstain. That's okay. We shouldn't all have opinions. There should be some acts we don't know, and there's some I don't know here. Earl, you're
Right.
going to break the tie here.
Well, I'm going to go no for one simple reason. How do they come up with the Spinners? I mean, for years they've had Rufus and Chaka Khan been put up, and they haven't gotten elected. You've also had Chic nominated time and time and time again. I could also point out the Ohio Players, Kool and the Gang, several other bands that were just as successful as the Spinners, but why not them? Why did we choose the Spinners? The one of the problems that we have when we go back to the 70s and especially the 60s and 50s is that we've already picked that carcass over pretty good. There's not much left on the bone there. And I think that sometimes when we start bringing out these artists from the 60s and 70s, it's like, well, shouldn't they have already been in now? And if they haven't been in, does that really make them worthy? There's just because you haven't been voted in yet, that doesn't automatically mean that you're worthy of being voted in. Yeah, and that's something I look at when I look at some of these artists. If the Spinners got in, I wouldn't be upset. Don't get me wrong, because I do think they've had a great body of work, but I just don't see what they've done beyond what, like I said, Kool and the Gang, Ohio Players, a few others have done.
Yeah. Well said. Very, very good arguments, all of you. The only thing I would add about the Spinners is having grown up with a lot of the music, I just remember, just so many hits. And one thing that the Motown acts, R&B acts from the 60s and 70s, they were at such a disadvantage regarding their own music and creativity and the albums and the titles of the song. They unfortunately were very constricted by forces above them in the business markets and things. They didn't have the creative freedom that, say, a lot of the rock artists had. I don't want to get into the racial thing. I think that's a lot of it as well. And I think they were penalized creatively because the only place for them to go in many instances, especially from that area of the country, like Becca, you're from Detroit, was to record with Motown and a few smaller labels. And of course, we're now recognizing some of those acts that were kind of forgotten. I think that's one of those that fell through the cracks. But is it a strong yes? No, it's not a strong yes, but I still think there's enough there to give them their due. So I will break the tie. I don't know whatever there's a tie, but I think they should be in. So, and I'm the host of the show, so that's the final word.
Well, that's the decision then. Get them in.
All right, 2 more to go, and this is a fun show. And then we're going to talk about one last topic, which will be who should be in that wasn't nominated so far. That's going to be the last question. Right before the last one is the White Stripes. I really like their music, but do they belong in the Hall of Fame? Who wants to go first? White Stripes.
I'll go first. Make it short and sweet. If this were based on personal preference, this would be the most emphatic no in the history of music, because I cannot stand listening to Jack White's voice. I realize he's an incredibly accomplished guitarist, but that aside, 6 studio albums, so the body of work's not there. I don't really know that they've influenced and impacted ton, and outside of music, they're not really ubiquitous in pop culture. I don't see that rising to the criteria for Rock Hall induction.
Becca?
I have to be a sad no on this one. I mean, personally, having a female drummer is pretty awesome. And, the fact that the songwriting is, whether you like Jack White's voice or not, the songwriting is decent. But I agree with you on like body of work and like influence outside of their particular genre. I don't see like the Cyndi Lauper kind of effect with across a culture. I mean, they definitely have cultural influence. So don't get me wrong. Please don't hate on me, people. I love
No.
playing. I love playing Seven Nation Army on my bass. I mean, that's it's fun. But yeah, it's a no for me.
Matt Lessinger.
Yeah, I mean, Seven Nation Army was an absolute masterpiece, but there is such a fall off after that, in my opinion. And even the stuff that they got nominated for, and then like Jack White got like some solo Grammy nominations, and I listened to it because that's what I do, and I did not understand the appeal of it. And maybe I have a sense that their stuff is more, if you're a musician or if you're musically trained, then you have more of an ear for their talent and what they did right. But just as a layman, like listening to it, beyond Seven Nation Army, I mean, there were a couple other songs that were listable, but I was honestly shocked when some of the songs that he got nominated for, I was like really surprised that the Grammy voters would have gravitated towards it, because it really did nothing for me at all. So it's a no.
Earl?
Well, I was going to go with yes on here, but and here's why. I like historically being able to link things. And Detroit, great history in rock and roll. Iggy Pop, MC5, the Pleasure Seekers, if you want to get into Susie Quattro and company. The thing is, they are direct linked back to that era. To that garage rock sound that came out of Detroit in the 60s and 70s. Ergo, they've also been able to transfer it on to bands like the Black Keys, Måneskin, can kind of trace back to the White Stripes, their styling. And so I had myself down as a yes on this, but I have to admit that my panel members here have me rethinking that a little bit.
I love that you bring up the Black Keys and Måneskin. They're better musicians. I love the White Stripes, but those guys, like you say, sometimes the originators are overlooked, and then the musicians get a little bit better. I think they just, whatever influence they've had, it seems like it's better from those guys, from those examples that you gave.
Excellent. All right. So
Wait, what's the final vote, Earl? Yes or no?
I am going to have to change my vote. I'm going to have to go to the no.
So that's
wow,
our
that's our first
no?
anonymous
It changed my mind. You guys brought up some very good points. The White Stripes are an acquired taste. So
all right.
yeah.
So our panel who hates the White Stripes is now going to go to the last. Now that you're right, I agree with that totally. Last one. I'm so glad we have this, our last one. This is going to be fun to debate as well. Earl, you're going to take this one first.
There is no debate on this one.
Oh, really?
There is
really?
literally
I
no
expected a debate.
on Warren Zevon. Without Warren Zevon, you do not have the California sound. He worked with Jackson Browne. He worked with Linda Ronstadt. He wrote songs that were picked up by many of those who had the California sound from the 70s. He was a brilliant songwriter, deft with a turn of phrase. He created characters that people could identify with, and even if they couldn't identify with them, they were still interesting. The man was a master songwriter, and he was really doing it all the way up to the time he died. And he put his own life into his music, especially on his final album, with one of the most heart-wrenching tunes that you could ever hear, "Keep Me in Your Heart." I mean, it was his legacy of work is brilliant. and that it's been this long since he got nominated for the first time it's really a crime. He should have been in years ago.
Can I ask a clarification question? Earl, going back to what you said at the very beginning of the show about, the criteria for getting in, and then you described other paths to getting in to the Hall of Fame, right? So are these, how much are we supposed to take songwriting into consideration as opposed to the songs they performed? Like, my impression was that songwriters would get in the other way that you described.
Well, you look at somebody like Carole King, who was originally put in through one of the side categories and then was voted in as a performer. Why was she voted in as a performer? For one album? I mean, right. Let's be honest. I mean, the reason they voted Carole King in was because they said, oh crap, we haven't voted her in as a performer. Okay, let's put her in. I mean, yeah, the thing is, yes, there are ways to do it. And if Zevon got in through the artistic merit entry, I could understand why they did it that way. But man, this is a guy who really, was at the backbone of the 70s sound and came up with some great material that will never be duplicated.
Becca?
Thank you.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with all of that. Wasn't again a surprise why he wasn't in sooner. I think the influence, the songwriting, yeah, I get that there's other ways to get in that way, but so many people write for everybody else, even though they perform. It's part of the deal. I mean, that's all over music. It's not just, oh, well, he's a songwriter, but he's also a performer. He's a yes. Overdue.
Hey, Jeremy.
Yeah, I mean, assuming that I defer to Earl's incredible base of knowledge on a lot of these artists, which is much broader than my own, I still go back to an argument that I made with a couple of the other nominees, which is Hall of Fame talent versus Hall of Fame career. And while all those things that Earl said may be true, and I know Billy Joel's been campaigning for Warren Zevon to get in, so obviously he's had some influence on other people, but from the standpoint of his recording career, I don't see it. So he's a no for me.
And Jeremy, was it you that said that politically, like somebody was trying to keep him out?
Jan Wenner, the founder of Rolling Stone, was long a big honcho in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame voting process. And I just read that today, as a matter of fact, that he had a personal dislike for Warren Zevon for some reason. And so that may be why he hadn't gotten nominated until now. I don't know the backstory behind that.
No, he's kept out a number of people, based on what I've read of him.
There's been long rumors that Wenner used his position to do that. None of it's ever been proven. It must be noted. Right. None of it has been proven.
All right, so let's do the final tally. We only had one. Sorry, go ahead, Becca.
Matt, did you give your opinion, Matt?
No, I mean, real quick. I mean, I was going to start out. I was going to abstain on him from the start. I mean, because I only know 2 songs of his in what was a really long career. I can name Werewolves of London and Lawyers, Guns and Money are the only 2 I would have ever known. But there's a couple of musician friends I have who are adamant that he belongs in the Hall of Fame, combined with the 2 of you saying, adamantly he belongs. So I am convinced to be a yes. So I'm a yes.
I guess I didn't convince you, good enough.
You didn't convince me. No.
All right, so we'll get to the final question in a moment. Just to recap, Willie Nelson, the only perfect 4-0 unanimous decision, Willie Nelson. The 3-1 yeses would be Warren Zevon. Soundgarden 2-1-1 yes. We had 1 abstention there. We had Iron Maiden 3-1 yes. Sheryl Crow 3-1 yes. Kate Bush, I don't have my glasses on. The divided panel, Missy Elliott 2-2. George Michael 2-2. Cyndi Lauper, 2-2. Spinners, 1-2, no. And then on the solid nose, White Stripes, 3 no's, 1 yes. Rage Against the Machine, by the way, was a tie. Joy Davidson, New Order, 3-1 no. A Tribe Called Quest, 3-1 no. And Kate Bush, 3-1 no. Nobody got a complete
I
blank.
think
Nobody
the
got
White
a-
Stripes got 4 no's.
They did get 0 and 4?
Yeah, we were all no on White Stripes.
Oh, that's
Yep.
right. You got pulled over. That's right. On
Because
the
Earl changed his mind.
I
Earl
changed
his
my mind. Yes.
That's right. All right. So now let's get to the final question. You know what it is. A lot of people, even on that watch this later, are going to have their opinions. They can type it in. And all of the panelists, by the way, will respond to any comments later. Sometimes this stays up and it's still getting traffic, a week later. So thank you for watching. If you've been watching, and if you watch this later, please feel free to type in your opinion, your comments, and any other, thoughts you have on this. So we're going to discuss finally the one artist or band or entity that still belongs in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame that is not in yet and is not nominated this year. Jeremy Sen, why don't you start us off?
Sure. So I'll say that there aren't really many acts left that I would lobby vociferously for. I don't have incredibly strong opinions. Once Def Leppard got in a few years ago, that was the last one that I would have really gone to the wall to say they should be in. But that having been said, my pick is one that's falls in one of those dubious categories, like I mentioned earlier, where they separate groups from solo artists, and sometimes that gets a little cloudy, whether somebody should be inducted more than once. But I just looked at the folks who were not in, and this was like the clear-cut person for me, and it's Ozzy Osbourne. So 13 studio albums, first 7 of which have all been certified multi-platinum in the US, 3 others either gold or platinum, 20 top 10 singles on the US mainstream rock chart with 2 crossover top 10s, 100 million plus copies sold between his solo career and Black Sabbath, 12 Grammy nominations with 5 wins. He's in the Hall of Fame with Black Sabbath. They were inducted in 2006. He's in the UK Hall of Fame, both solo and with Sabbath. He's even in the celebrity wing of the World Wrestling Federation Hall of Fame. And of course, landmark reality TV series, The Osbournes, which was an Emmy winner. He and his wife Sharon launched Ozfest, a hugely successful festival tour for hard rock, metal, and alternative artists. I think it's fairly well documented the influence and the impact that he's had in the rock community, and just he's an iconic pop culture character, almost could describe it that way. So he's my pick for who should be in.
Solid argument. Who wants to go next?
Don't everyone jump in at once.
All right, I'm going to call on somebody like the teacher, Matt Lessinger.
Okay. I guess I would go, I have no argument with Ozzy Osbourne, by the way. I would go in a completely different direction and maybe talk about somebody that wouldn't get nominated this traditional way, but in through one of the side doors that Earl mentioned. I mean, if we're opening up the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame to all genres, then it is unquestionably Michael Cretu, the alchemist, who was the genius behind Enigma and one of the fathers of modern electronic dance music. I mean, if Joy Division and New Order can be nominated, right? I mean, that's sort of opening the door for, they were nominated for a really raw sounding, only suitable for clubs music, in my opinion. Then where is Michael Cretu, who brought electronic dance music into everybody's home, whether you were clubbing or not, whether you were a teenager or middle-aged? I mean, he took it to a whole new level. And it's one of the main reasons why EDM enjoys the popularity it does today. So that would be my pick.
Becca?
Who's next?
Yeah, this may surprise a few people, but maybe not. I mean, I love Phil Collins. I don't know why he's not in. And the guys had, not just with Genesis. I mean, Genesis is great. They're a phenomenal group, and Peter Gabriel's in separately. But Phil himself, amazing songwriting, pianist, drummer, can sing and play drums, which anybody will tell you is very, very challenging. I mean, singing and playing any instrument is tough. I struggle to do it on some things, but to split your attention like that and to do it well is very, very, very difficult. He's had hits, his career has gone back so low to the 70s, the 80s. He was still performing and writing things in the 90s. I mean, he did the soundtrack for Tarzan, which was phenomenal music. I don't understand why he's not in already.
I didn't know he wasn't in. For what
Yeah,
it's
that
worth.
was he
Yeah.
was one of the ones that I strongly considered looking at the list. So I would second that in addition to my own pick.
Yeah. It's just a matter of time, probably we can agree. Earl Burton.
Well, I've got two websites where I write about things. One of them is a personal website, earlburton.com. The other one's tampaearl.com, which is where I try to write about a lot of my music stuff. But on earlburton.com, I went decade by decade and pointed out artists that are deserving of being inducted, in my opinion, at least. I'm going to have to go with two selections. One would be DJ Kool Herc and Coke La Rock, the originators of rap. They were the ones who in 1973 in a basement in Brooklyn, New York, created the what would become rap music. Like it or hate it, it is a part of society today, and it will continue to be a part of it. It's a part of rock and roll. If you listen to artists, rock artists that are out there today, Falling in Reverse comes to mind right off the top of my head. Looking beyond that, I would have to go with War. War was a multicultural band that incorporated Latin rhythms into a rock blues bass. And they did it so smoothly. It was really incomparable, the sounds that they were able to come up with. And if you didn't have a photo of the band in front of them, you wouldn't have known that they were a multicultural band. They transcended not only the race, but the music. And I think War's quite deserving of being inducted. I would also throw up, Thin Lizzy, Motorhead, a couple others in there.
Excellent. Well, I'll close with mine. Burt Bacharach, the great composer. And again, we open it up to other people. This is the first ballot. This is the George Gershwin of the later half of the 20th century when it comes to composition of an astonishing number of hits, influencing so many artists. But that's not my answer. My answer is actually Glenn Campbell. Glenn Campbell started out as with the Wrecking Crew for 10 years, played his dues, a very underrated guitarist. Look at his wiki page. Look at the hits he played on behind the scenes. Then in 1968, he starts his own solo career, is in an Academy Award-winning movie, then has a top 5 television show that runs 4 seasons, introduced so many other people on his stage, much like Johnny Cash did, working in a collaborative effort with rock artists and a lot of artists that you wouldn't associate with country. Glenn Campbell and Jimmy Webb, just what a dynamic duo of songwriters. And he performed all the way up until he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's in 2015-16, died in 2017. What an astonishing career Glenn Campbell had. I think he deserves also induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So that's my final word. I want to thank all.
You bring up a good
Yeah.
point there with Glenn Campbell. Why not the entirety of the Wrecking Crew?
No, that's very good. You're absolutely right. Excellent discussion. I sure enjoyed it. We went real long, but I think we went long because we had a lot to say and a lot of great content here. Let's all do it again, gang. I'm going to introduce everybody one more time. Becca, you're going to close this out by telling us where you're playing here in Las Vegas. Anybody listening, we got to go check you out. Jeremy Sand, thank you for joining us, sir.
Thank you for inviting me.
Earl Burton, where can we find your work?
Oh, you can find my work regarding music at rocketnight.com. You can also go to my personal webpage, tampaearl.com. Every Sunday afternoon, 1 p.m. Eastern, I'm on realrockradio.co.uk, where I will have 2 radio shows that come on back to back. And I think that covers it all. Yeah, that about covers everything.
Yeah, please type in a link there on the comments, so anybody that wants to type in that, and visit, it'd be an easy click away. So thank you, Earl Burton. And my cohort in crime and everything, all politics and music and everything else, Matt Lessinger.
I've got nothing to promote. It was just a pleasure being here, and thank you to everyone. It was a lot of fun.
And I'll give you that band information. So it's The Real Good Hurt, and we're performing next Saturday, February 25th, 9 p.m. at Millennium Fandom Bar. It is in downtown Las Vegas.
Excellent. Thanks so much. See you next year.
Thanks, Nolan.
Thank you.
Thank you.